Word on this.
Okay, got it.
Okay, recording in progress. You heard it. Nice. Welcome everyone. Folks are still filing in slowly but surely. It's nice to see so many names, new names, old names, folks I've spoken to, folks I have not. I'm going to go ahead and mute everyone right now, just so we don't get any weird feedback. I think I'm going to mute everyone. I don't know. I'm trying to mute everyone. Turns out the audio engineer, who knows if he can actually make this work. Great. Lots of people showing up. Very exciting. Very, very exciting. Just a quick note for those of you who have already joined, if you have headphones, we're going to try and do some listening. So it'd be a good experience to have headphones with if you want. Headphones are optional, but highly recommended. All right, so I'm going to mute everyone here. You can unmute yourself if you'd like to speak. And we're still getting more folks joining here. So I'm going to keep admitting people. Everyone grab themselves your morning, afternoon, evening beverage of choice. And yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun today. Gonna wait another few minutes before we start. I'm curious if people want to put in the chat where they're calling in from. I would love to hear where everyone's at around the world. Be really interesting. And who knows, maybe you make some new friends.
Well, Matt, it appears that when I open up the chat bar, because you're sharing your screen. Oh, here we go.
There we go.
Now it's in center.
Canada, Austria, Sweden, South Africa, Washington, Tennessee, the UK. Emily Hessler's here from Sweden. Yeah, Emily.
Oh
my
Emily.
gosh.
All right.
So great. Exciting.
And we see Perry. Good to see you, Perry. Perry and I are going to head down to the Amazon here in February as part of a recording trip. And Lauren, glad that you could join us.
Oh, Lauren, nice to see you. Great.
Yeah, and I was looking through our team list that we have, and Quiet Parks International has been growing so quickly that I know that I haven't met most of you. I used to know everybody, but now I don't. I wish we could have time to share some information and about each other. Maybe we will towards the end of this presentation. I certainly, my email, gordon@quietparks.org, will reach me, and I'd love to make a separate Zoom arrangement where we can just talk one-on-one, and I can hear your individual concerns, get to know you as a person. We can talk about quiet. One of the benefits of our earlier meeting is, for me personally, is I didn't feel so alone in my appreciation of quiet. And the part of the benefits of QPI, starting, with Vikram and myself, and then others coming on board, is we could really feel the groundswell of interest, and that quiet is a real thing. It's not just something that happens to crazy people, right? And I don't
know, it might still just happen to crazy people, Gordon.
Okay, we aren't going to exclude. We're very inclusive here. Crazy people too. And well, anyway, I just want to thank each and every one of you from the bottom of my heart for taking the time really to care about quiet and do something instead of just complain about the noise. And we've made incredible progress. So thank you all. Thank you, really. And I hope you do email me so we can make an arrangement and have a little chat about quiet. Gordon@quietparks.org.
Yeah, I just put Gordon's email in the chat as well as my email, matt@quietparks.org. We are both very accessible, and we spend a lot of time like alone in our offices, and we love talking with people who like quiet. So, Gordon, give us who are you? No one's ever heard of you. Give us an introduction.
Who, no, really. Well, who
There
I
might be people who don't know who Gordon Hempton is, you know.
Okay. Well, who I am today is a career nature sound recordist, 40 years worth, gone through all the cycles of young, fresh ears, hearing everything through projects of that in some cases are global in scope, in some cases just have to do with following a stream in Olympic National Park from the mouth to the source, all kinds of projects. And today I am trying to retire. I'm making my second try at retiring, but it's really hard to retire when you're passionate. So certainly Quiet Parks International has become a full-time job, just like it is for so many of us at Quiet Parks. And my biggest concern for me outside of Quiet Parks International as I mentor young people in the confidence that they already have once they can tap into their basic instinctual listening level and then just record what you like, to have confidence in your feelings of what you like. So that's me today. Sure.
Beautiful, beautiful. Gordon, will you also tell us where you're calling from?
Oh, sure. I'm calling from Seattle, Washington, where Seattle is gray right there this time of year. And in my office here, which has all kinds of memorabilia from ages of recording and equipment everywhere.
Only a tiny little Emmy on the shelf. You know what I mean? Everyone's got to have one. Oh boy, we have fun. Okay, I'll introduce myself. I am Matt Mikkelsen. Right now, I'm the director of Wilderness Quiet Parks for Quiet Parks International. I've been on the Quiet Parks train since before Quiet Parks was Quiet Parks, and have been really lucky to be on this journey with Gordon and Vikram and all the other beautiful people who've helped us make this happen. I currently live in Duluth, Minnesota, on the land of the Ojibwe people. If you're looking at a map of the United States, that's on the western tip of Lake Superior. So it's very cold, very snowy, and very quiet, which suits me pretty well. I also want to point out another board member that we have on the call today is Nick McMahon, who is been instrumental in the growth of Quiet Parks International. He also has just welcomed his first child into the world and is still doing a bunch of work to preserve quiet. So it's really exciting to have Nick here, as well as Emily Hessler, who contributed some recordings and photographs unknowing to her. Emily, some of your Hawaii recordings are in here, I think, or the recordings you and Nick did. So yeah, we have a lot of familiar faces on this call and people who I'm really excited to have here. And with that, it looks like there's no one else in the waiting room. So we're going to get started here. You can all see my screen. Give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Awesome. I'm going to be playing some sounds, just a few sounds throughout the presentation, because all of us like listening in quiet. So if you have headphones, grab them. If not, no worries. But we're sound nerds here. We like our headphones. We like our sounds. So we're going to talk about what's been going on in Wilderness Quiet Parks world. What are some of the next quiet parks happening? What are some of the challenges we've been facing? We'll talk about how to find quiet, or at least how I find quiet. And I'm sure that'll be an open dialogue. Gordon will chime in, Nick might chime in about how we go about finding these quiet places and recording them. We'll talk about the equipment that we use. Equipment's like a really big topic that a lot of folks really like talking about. So we'll kind of dive into that a little bit more in this call than the last call that we had in October, was it maybe? We can talk a little bit more about that. And then we'll talk about what the current standards and best practices are for kind of awarding a wilderness quiet park. What are the standards that a place has to meet to be considered and awarded a wilderness quiet park? And then we'll talk about funding and like how we've tried to get funding to award these parks. And then I think a lot of time for question and answer. This is like really an opportunity for us to connect with you all. And I've had separate conversations with a lot of you. We're all kind of chasing different threads of communication through this. So this is like a really nice way for us all to come together, connect with people, and yeah, just have a good time, do some listening, talk about quiet.
Great, Matt. And if we have time, I'd like to also, towards the end, do a little intro to a new classification that we have, because if your area fails our standards as a wilderness quiet park, or even urban quiet park, any other quiet trail, any classification, we now have a new category, which is quiet conservation area. And it does not, apply then to if it's quiet, but if the intent of the land by land managers is that quiet is to be appreciated and is one of the values that are trying to restore that natural resource, then it's possible it could be eligible for a quiet conservation area. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that later.
Great addition for sure. Yeah, quiet conservation area is a new program area that we have that's getting up and running by the minute, and is really exciting because it's kind of all inclusive of any area that people are working to protect quiet in. So great. Well, let's just start with basic, like, what is a wilderness quiet park? If anyone doesn't know, we consider it any piece of publicly accessible land that experiences a dependable 15-minute noise-free interval, time in between noise pollution events. So that's still the metric we're using to identify wilderness quiet, is the noise-free interval. Of course, we take decibel level readings and all sorts of other things, but the noise-free interval is still, in our mind, the gold standard for what constitutes a wilderness quiet park. Another important note is that any single noise event that happens can disqualify a place automatically. So I know Gordon and I and Nick and lots of other people who record sound have been in a really quiet place, and then all of a sudden a fighter jet flies over our head. Things like that can automatically disqualify a place from obtaining wilderness quiet park status, even if it has a 15-minute noise-free interval. Let's do some listening, because, who doesn't like starting out the meeting with some listening? These are some examples from upcoming wilderness quiet parks that we have. So one of the parks we're really excited about is American Prairie Reserve. I didn't put these places on a map. I should have done that. But we do have a really great map feature on our website now that you can check out and see a list of the hundreds of different classifications of places that we've been nominating and working on. This is in northeastern Montana in the United States here. And yeah, let's take a listen to some coyotes and some meadowlarks and lots of other bird activity from American Prairie Reserve. And this is from my trip there in spring of 2021. to be in the prairie.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Do you recall offhand what the DBA was?
So Nick was with me on that trip. That's actually the trip that Nick and I met for the first time. We had been talking on the phone for like months, and he decided to take a leap and spend, a week out in the prairie with me. So Nick, maybe you have better recollection of this, but there was so much bird activity when we were there. It was so shocking. I remember we like pulled up to where we were going to camp and got out of the car, and both of us were like, what? It was just rocking. It was like that the whole time. That recording was from dawn, but even throughout the day, there was just so much bird activity. So I don't think it was as quiet as the prairie can be in like the off season. Like when I was there in October of the same year, I was getting below 30 dBA a lot. No bird activity, really nothing going on. But no noise pollution for hours at a time in American Prairie Reserve. Nick, do you remember any like DBA readings or anything from that trip?
I don't think we were measuring the dBA at the time because we were mostly there for recording. And the May season is just so great for the sounds of the prairie. In between, mostly in the afternoon or in the middle of the night, I think it was the quietest, actually. And yeah, you're right. From other locations and other readings, I would say easily down in the low 30s or below. And we were very impressed by how infrequent the jet traffic was. We would see one, and then it would be an hour or sometimes more, but before the next jet, which is pretty good for North America.
Yeah, absolutely. And the trip I took back there in the fall was shocking because all of a sudden this landscape that was filled with just like so many species of birds I couldn't count them, all of a sudden was just like dead quiet. And it's funny, as you were talking about jets, I had a jet pass over, so noises everywhere, can't get away from it. So American Prairie Reserve is technically a not-for-profit, like a private entity, but their land is publicly accessible. They've hosted us now 2 or 3 separate times to do soundscape measurements and recording, and have been a really great partner. They also, one of their goals is to restore the bison population in the prairie. So bison are a really crucial kind of keystone species for the prairie, and they've been working to bring bison back to the prairies where they belong. So that was a phenomenal, still one of my favorite places I've ever recorded. So that's upcoming in 2022. 2023. Oh boy.
And Matt, I'd like to add too that one of the reasons why American Prairie Reserve was tested in the first place, because we found certainly there are a lot of places that we'd like to test, but if we just pick a place at pretty much random among the candidates, the management may or may not, really support us because they may not recognize the value of quiet. There are a whole host of reasons, but in the case of American Prairie Reserve, they reached out to us, and that's always a green light that we try to move quickly on that.
Yep. And it's also important to note that Grasslands National Park in Canada, I kind of bunched in here with it because Grasslands will also be receiving a Wilderness Quiet Park Award at around the same time. I'll talk more about this in a little bit later, but the Parks Canada has been a really great partner with us and is very interested in kind of forwarding the mission of listening and soundscape preservation and things like that. So American Prairie and Grasslands are pretty much right next to each other, just over the border. So that's exciting news as well. That'll be the first national park in Canada to receive an award. Next up is Boundary Waters Wilderness Canoe Area. That's in northern Minnesota, right kind of in my backyard here. And I've been to the Boundary Waters a bunch of times, and it is indeed really, really quiet. I'm going to share a sound recording now of some loons that I was lucky enough to be there to witness in also spring of 2021. Listen to the echo that has through the space, totally unprocessed. I think I measured the reverb time on that lake is like 9 or 10 seconds or something crazy. Really beautiful. Boundary Waters has a lot of really unique listening experiences, but the loon calls in the spring are just like really iconic and a beautiful thing to experience. So the Boundary Waters Wilderness Area is an upcoming wilderness quiet park here in the States as well. And we have more upcoming parks I can talk about, but the last one I'll play a sound from is from Haleakala in Hawaii. This photo is courtesy of Nick. The sound is courtesy of Nick. And Nick and Emily went there in spring of last year, I believe, to do some recording and some more data collection. So here's some beautiful birds on the rim of this volcano in Hawaii. That's such a beautiful recording, Nick. Anything, Emily or Nick, that you both remember about your time in the park there and interesting listening experiences? I haven't been lucky enough to go there yet. I know Gordon's been as well. But yeah, anything to add about the experience there in the park?
Yeah, I guess just, I mean, really, it was just like mind blowing how quiet it was. I never ever been anywhere like that before. Especially like camping out there for 3 nights. Like at night, it was just like dead silent, especially when there weren't any birds. The silence was almost deafening in a way, just because we were just not used to that at all. In everyday lives. But yeah, it was a really amazing experience.
Yeah, the silence, especially even in the afternoon time, there was kind of this lull in the crater, and it really has this almost overwhelming sense, especially the first day or so, because it's just so unusual kind of for us to experience that type of, it's almost like an isolation or like a sound deprivation that we aren't really used to. A little surprising, along some of the trails you can really hear people talking all along the way, so you kind of have to really work your way to more isolated areas. But it's already, the area is already famous, and people may know this already, kind of famous for it being a uniquely quiet location, and the crater kind of holds the silence in. Gordon and I talked extensively about it, before and during and after the trip, and I think he's also had some pretty profound experiences in that crater.
Mm-hmm. Nick, is that a pheasant that I'm hearing?
Yeah, there are pheasants there, and I believe that they were imported for hunting in like the early 1900s and have been very successful spreading around.
Okay, I was listening to this recording as I was putting together the presentation. I was like, that sounds like a pheasant. It's not an animal I would expect to be living up on top of a crater.
Yeah, it's a very, actually, I think I heard the same pheasant in American Prairie. So
nice. Oh, funny things we've done to nature.
And Matt, a quick update, since Nick is here too, will Haleakala receive 2 awards, both Wilderness Quiet Park and Quiet Trail? Is that what's upcoming?
I think that's the goal. The difficult thing, and Gordon, I'm not like telling this to you because you know, but for the rest of the folks, one of the difficult things about working in national parks is we've been trying to get buy-in from the Park Service and the management agencies to essentially say like, yeah, this is exciting for us. We want to help support this. And I think especially it seems like in the United States, our management agencies are overworked, understaffed. They have like very little resources to devote to things like this. So it's not that they're not excited, not that they don't appreciate the work, but trying to like get them to sign off on this as a thing has definitely proved difficult for us and has changed our strategy a bit. Where this year we're kind of going to go ahead and award places and want the park to be as involved as they want, but don't necessarily want that to hold us up from awarding places, because that's a challenge that we really faced last year, was waiting on the park to kind of give us the okay, and then have their PR people sign off on it and all these other things. So yeah, also worth noting that like working with Indigenous people in each of these areas is really important to us. Conservationists for too long have like come to a place, decided it's important, and decided to protect it with no input from local communities. So that also takes time, and connecting with people and having these dialogues is something we really value. And in the States, like this is a really complex and important thing to kind of work on, is this kind of realization that, yeah, all of our national parks, a lot of our conservation areas, most of the preserved land and the most ecologically healthy land is native land. So kind of working with the tribes in the areas that we're working with to talk to them and gain confidence and make sure it's beneficial for them is important too. So that's kind of where we're at with Haleakala. But it's certainly quiet, and it's well known that it's quiet, so it deserves that recognition for sure. So kind of just going to move on to like, what are some of the obstacles that I'm facing as in my role as director of the program, and that this can also be applied to other program areas of Quiet Parks too. One is that there's only so much time in the day, and that's also, a lot of you may know this, but we are a completely volunteer organization. So not only have you all volunteered your time very graciously, but Gordon, Nick, Emily, myself, we're all unpaid volunteers. So it's time that we love. I think all of us love this work more than most of our other work that we get to do. But we have to balance those things with our other parts of our job. So it's none of us get to spend as much time on it as we would like. And for me, what that looks like is, a lot of people reach out and say, oh, I live in this area, I want to award a park or work to record a park. And if I get 20 of those emails a week, that's like 20 different people I have to coach through the process and try and work with. And it's hard to standardize this process because each location deserves a unique approach. But that's one of our goals for this year, is to kind of work on how do we get more people out in the field recording, taking data and listening, without me having to necessarily sign off on everything. So that's exciting, but it's been an obstacle for us for sure. Money is obviously an obstacle too. Like anyone who works in nonprofits will tell you, it's not easy to get funding for a nonprofit. Quiet Parks is not immune to that struggle. So sometimes we have money to do things, sometimes we don't. And a lot of times that doesn't stop us from doing things. We do it anyway because we care. Another obstacle has been, working with, like I was mentioning before, the park staff or the land management agency, or nonprofit partners, to kind of get everyone to sign off on the fact that this is going to be a wilderness quiet park or an urban quiet park or a quiet trail. There's a lot of lag time that happens. So Quiet Parks moves really swiftly. Like we can make decisions really quickly. Our board meets every week. Like we're really fast paced, but when you start working with folks like the National Park Service, stuff requires a little bit more time. So awards like Grasslands National Park are now 2 years in the making. Mostly just because, yeah, we want to work with the park, and it takes some time. Yeah, Gordon?
Yes. So we've had conversations in our board meetings and from the very early days, because whenever you take on a global project and then you look at the obstacles, and it was Henry Ford, the auto manufacturer, who said, obstacles are what you see when you take your eyes off the goal. And we believe at Quiet Parks, and it's really a heartwarming feeling too, that we believe that whatever time you can make available as you balance it with your everything else that you need to do will be enough. It will be enough. Don't worry about that. It won't be enough and that you'll fail or whatever. It will be enough. And with that attitude, we immediately, within the first year, had our first wilderness quiet park, right? So I encourage everybody to, to know that we appreciate every hour that you can give and the goal that you want to achieve, whatever time you can give, it will be enough. It might take longer, but that's okay. We're going to reach our goal.
Yeah, great point. And that ties into like this last kind of bullet here on the slide, which is our biggest strength is the fact that we have this incredible international network of people who care about quiet, who know it's important, and who want to work to protect it. And I know I speak for everyone who is on the Quiet Parks board and all of our partners, and how thankful we are to be connected with folks like you all. It's the thing that brings us the most joy is working with our volunteers and people who care, because we are also just volunteers and people who care. Like Nick reached out to Gordon or myself a few years ago wanting to be involved, and he's involved. Emily did the same thing, and you all are like playing a really important role in this. And a lot of you on this call, without mentioning anyone specifically, have contributed a lot to this effort. So that's what we have going for us, and that's something that no other organization in this space has. Is this just incredible network of people who care really deeply and who all bring their own talents and cultures with them as we work to listen and protect quiet. So I'm talking about how to find quiet. This is how I find quiet, or some of the ways that I find quiet. There are a lot of different methods. There's no wrong approach if your result in the end is you've found quiet. Gordon and I share some similarities, some differences. Nick and I share some stuff. We all approach this a bit differently, and the only way to kind of nail down your process is to try it. But what I usually start with is like a noise pollution and light pollution maps if they're available. Light pollution is a really great indicator for population density. You can also look at population density maps. Places with less people living in them will inherently be quieter. Transportation noise maps are really helpful too. While they're sometimes a little bit harder to get a hold of, they require a little bit of digging. Also a really great place to start. You could also just look at a major road map, and looking at any sort of area that's a few miles away from a road or a few kilometers away from a road is already a good place to start. The kind of next thing I'll do when I'm looking at an area is go to the live flight radar. I use an app called Flight Radar 24. We have no partnership with them. That's just my favorite of the apps to use. They have a free version you can download. They also have a website, Flight Radar 24. It shows a live air traffic map of where all the planes are. You can see that image in the lower right-hand corner here of the slide. And it's zoomed out, so it's not even showing all the planes in the sky, but you can kind of zoom into an area that you're looking at and just start studying the flight traffic and what it's like there.
Quick question, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not the day, this is a moment of time?
Yeah. This is just one singular second of time that I took a screenshot yesterday. It'll tell you how many aircraft are in the air at any given time. You can also, I think, this might be a paid feature. I do subscribe to it because I use it so much, but you can do a historical view too. So you can go back and look at over a week's worth of time, you know, play it fast forward or rewind it, see how many planes are crossing an area. That's really helpful for me when I come back from a recording trip. And if I didn't have service at the time, I can say, oh, at 7:01 a.m., I heard what I thought was a commercial aircraft, but it may have been private, or maybe it was road noise. I can rewind and kind of look at that stuff, I think up to a year. So that's really helpful as well.
So this would mean that if you were thinking of exploring an area, you could actually look historically at it and pretty fairly determine if you have a 15-minute noise-free interval based on airplane noise.
Yeah, I mean, it gives you a good idea. The big caveat is that they don't track military flights. And they also don't track all private aircraft. So some smaller prop planes, like a lot of bush planes and things like that, don't carry these transponders that pump out this signal. So I'd say it captures 95% of commercial air traffic and a lot of private aircraft, but does not do military, at least not in the United States. I think in Europe, you get to see a little bit more of what military aircraft are up to. But in the States, you don't get to see that. So there might be big blank areas on the map here in the US, and I've gone thinking, oh my God, I'm so excited. And then to find out it's like a military fly zone and it's military aircraft flying the whole time. Which kind of brings me to the looking at the aeronautical charts, which is like a little bit nerdier, but also is really helpful. That's in the upper right-hand corner here. This is a snapshot of the boundary waters and the northern shore of Lake Superior. It's just an area I'm familiar with. I use a website called Sky Vector, and they have different views, but pretty much what this will tell you is if there's designated airspace. So the military train, for the most part, in places that are designated military operating areas. So on this map, you can see it's called Snoopy West, MOA, Military Operating Area. So you know that there's a possibility of military flights in that area, and you can do more research into how much those areas are used. And then also see, like up in the northern part of the map here, a prohibited airspace. So any aircraft can't fly under 4,000 feet unless for emergency reasons, and that's because it's a designated wilderness area. Maps like this are like a helpful second step when you're looking at air traffic. Most of us are going to battle air traffic more than road noise, especially, I mean, just everywhere I've been, air traffic is the hardest thing to navigate around. The flight radars too, you know, planes will divert around storm systems, planes will divert for all different types of reasons. So it's hard to guarantee that any area is not going to experience overflights. All areas do, but you can at least start studying like, oh, what is the general pattern of aircraft in this area? So you just have more information kind of when you go into places, as well as being able to reference after the fact. If you're in a place that should be quiet or you think is quiet, being able to, after you come back, reference the data that the flight radar is giving you about overflights in the area is helpful, I think. The last tool that I know Gordon uses a lot, I use a lot, is a live marine traffic app. So there's one just called Marine Traffic that's free on the App Store. This is just a screenshot from a given moment in time, a few minutes after I took the flight map screenshot of all the boats in the water around the world. And again, this is zoomed out, so it's not even showing all of them, but man, there is a crazy amount of boats in the water, large shipping vessels in the water at any given time, all over the place. Looking at these maps is really interesting for a lot of reasons, but it also gives you the idea that finding quiet along our coasts is not necessarily easier, even if there isn't air traffic that is flying over them. So that's kind of my approach. Sometimes if I'm trying to visit a national park or a conservation area, I'll inquire to see if they've done any soundscape studies, if they've ever taken noise measurements, to kind of follow that path and see where it leads. I'll try and talk with land managers or even the public in the area about like, hey, what's the quietest place around here? I've had a lot of fruitful conversations with people at like random diners in the middle of Montana about like, where do you go for some quiet? And gotten to some pretty cool places. Gordon, Nick, Emily, anyone with other tips, tricks, things that they like to put in?
I would like to say a couple of things. Is that most of you may have already noticed that time of day is critically important for how well sound propagates, and that's the whole reason I believe why birds have formed the dawn chorus. Excuse me, is that their messages are sent with the minimum amount of energy. And it's also very possible if you're in canyon lands, dry desert environments, that in the midday, when it's hot and the winds are blowing, you can look up and actually see a jetliner passing overhead, but you can't hear it. Okay. But at dawn, you'll hear it. When it's overhead, it'll be as loud as I'm speaking now. And at dawn, you'll hear it without seeing it. So the critical time of assessment during for wilderness quiet park status is not those unfavorable times of day where noise sound doesn't travel. It's the 2 hours before sunrise until 1 hour after sunrise, that 3 hour period that wildlife is just so busy communicating, whether it's like vocalizing or listening and trying to detect prey. That is the most critical time of day. So that's there. And then also when it comes to coastlines and water, the same thing applies for time of day because wind wave activity and stuff like this. But when you get into cold waters, like in the North Country and calm lakes, the sound waves don't propagate normally. They don't radiate out, but there's a boundary layer effect. And so in effect, the whole lake becomes like a giant ear. And so for those of you who like to record wildlife and you are in a quiet location, be sure to check out within that 1.5 feet off the top of the water at the margin of the lake. And boy, it's just like, wow. In the tropics, it's not so important because you already have, first of all, within the jungle, calm atmospheric conditions. So sound is propagating well, but it's humid and it's also warm. Excellent conditions, which the air is now elastic and sound propagates. So it's like, the sound source may be 60 feet away, but it sounds like you're hanging a lav on it. It's just like, so crystal clear. So those are considerations certainly to take. Yeah.
Definitely. And the next section is kind of about how we test and what our recommendations are for testing. But, Gordon, myself, I know a lot of us here, we care about quiet as its own thing. And then we also love recording sound. And so we love kind of nerding out about different conditions for recording sound and what's best and the way that sound reverberates and things like that. So in our Q&A, like any and all questions about sound, I think are appropriate. And also, Lauren pointed out in the chat that she's worked with someone that does programming and using Python to scrape websites like Flight Radar 24 to give like a 1-month cumulative data set on overflights. Lauren's research is super incredible. I'm a huge fangirl, and Lauren's done a lot of work for years now on protecting quiet on the Olympic Peninsula. So big shout out to Lauren. Look up her research and things like that. It's really impactful. So on to the next big topic of conversation. I can't believe we're 45 minutes in now, is the equipment that we use. There's no right or wrong way to go about this. I think it's important to note that like whatever you have is the best thing to start with. I think a lot of people think like, oh, I need to get a new recorder or a new microphone before I can really start recording nature sounds or the sounds of quiet. And I don't think that's super helpful. Whatever you have is beautiful and worth working with. And there's always room for improvement. I have sound recordings that I've taken on my cell phone that I cherish and love just as much as I have taken recordings on $20,000 worth of microphones that I cherish and love. So don't let equipment be a barrier to you starting to learn the craft and art of sound recording and recording wilderness sounds and wildlife sounds. But I will talk a little bit about what we kind of lean towards in equipment, what some of our setups are, just conversationally. These conversations could last 3 hours, but I'll just kind of let you know what's typically in our kits that we take out there with us. Some of this language might be totally foreign to you. If you don't understand about this equipment, no worries. But all of us nature sound recordists love Sennheiser MKH series microphones. They are super durable. They're not sensitive to humidity. They're very sensitive, have a low noise floor. That's something we talk about a lot in nature sound recording is the noise floor. And that's something that's really important for gathering data on quiet. If you take a microphone with a high noise floor out into the woods and it's quiet, you're going to hear a lot of hiss just from the electronics of the microphone and the noise floor kicking in. So we always try and use the highest sensitivity or lowest noise floor microphones that we can, especially in these environments that are really, really quiet in terms of the sound pressure level. That being said, we also love handheld recorders. Gordon, myself, Nick, like we have arsenals of Sony handheld recorders that we just throw out everywhere we go. With us, the Sony handhelds, I think, have proven to be kind of the most useful for our kind of work. I think they're the best bang for the buck at this point, much more so than the Zoom or the Tascam style recorders. And the onboard microphones are good. We've been pulling sounds that we use in our sound libraries, in our collections that we've taken from Sony handheld recorders, which is really amazing. And their frequency response is great. Their battery life is great. Sony is not at all a partner of ours. We don't get paid, unfortunately, to say this, but we love Sony handhelds. I also do a lot of recording with Schoeps microphones. That's more from a sound design perspective than anything, but what's really an important factor to look at if you're considering buying equipment or you're trying to analyze how great your equipment will perform in a nature sound recording setting is looking at your noise floor. We like microphones with a low noise floor. It's going to be less hissy. So we definitely like save your questions about equipment for the end. We'll talk a lot about it, but I just kind of wanted to give you an idea of what we usually go out with when we go. So I often will pack, I have a big Schoeps ORTF 3D microphone I do a lot of recording with, which is like this huge 8-channel system that I use in a lot of my sound design work. But I also typically will bring multiple sets of Sennheiser MKH series microphones, either in a spaced pair configuration or an ORTF configuration or a mid-side configuration. If all of that is jargon you don't understand, don't worry about it. What's important is that we have a stereo recording that's high fidelity of these places when we go to analyze them for noise pollution data. I usually deploy multiple sets of equipment kind of all over the place. I'll bring as much as I can and then just like litter my microphones all throughout an area that I'm trying to gather data in places that make sense, and then just go through and collect them or change out batteries, change out cards, leave them rolling for a long time. And from a sound gathering perspective, it's really effective to do that. Another thing that we all carry with us a lot is some sort of sound pressure level meter. And that is even iPhone based is what I go on my light trips. iPhones have actually a really accurate microphone that they've been able to calibrate for sound pressure level meters. There's Gordon taking a measurement of my voice now. Where am I peaking at? What are my hot frequencies there?
Well, it's interesting. Ethan, who's a technical person on our standards committee, he recommended Sound Meter Pro. It's a little bit expensive, $99, but what it does is it's within, I haven't tested it against my B&K 2225 yet, which has its own independent calibrator, but it's supposed to be, and I don't know how this is possible, within a decibel of that. So $99 compared to thousands of dollars. And this, I haven't discovered it yet, but it has a data logging ability. So I can actually store the data on here and then transfer it and through an app on my desktop, get all kinds of information.
Mhm.
And then there's a much simpler one, which is just cat meter. All right. This is also for the iPhone.
Ooh, vintage
And,
look.
yeah, I know. I kind of like that. This I can keep track of. And I have compared this on my iPhone to my B&K, and it's within 3 decibels of accuracy, which for the purposes that when we're trying to judge ambient levels, while 3 decibels might be a difference of, a doubling of the acoustic energy, it's still well within acceptable range for judging it, whether it'll meet our standards.
Mhm. Another note, Gordon, is actually the company that makes that sound level meter pro, Faber Acoustical, has a free version that just doesn't do data logging and it doesn't do frequency response. So you
Okay.
can get just a basic sound level reading with their free app too, which works pretty well. But as I said earlier, like sound pressure level is an important reference point for us, but it's not the the Amazon jungle. I don't think we experienced on our last trip there any sort of lower decibel levels, but very little noise pollution. So it's important to look at those things as separate. I kind of want to.
I just need to interject something because earlier, about 5 minutes ago, when we were discussing equipment and how to record and stuff, I included a link. And this is a link to my book, Earth is a Solar Powered Jukebox. And this, if you keep the link to yourself, because this bypasses the pay system, and you can read at least what I've written about how to record, listen, and sound design with sounds. And I go habitat by habitat on that. So I do not in this book, though, cover equipment because this book is now nearly 10 years old. It's just strictly technique and approach and the ecological principles.
Mm-hmm. Which is way more important than like what kind of capsule you're using, to be honest.
Because that is always changing.
Yep, definitely. So I want to kind of breeze through the next few slides and points so we have a lot of time for question and answer. I know we're getting to the top of the hour. I have nothing going on, so we can stay as long as you want, but I just want to be sensitive to people's time. So other than the SPL meter, any sort of data logging or a journal is what I use most of the time. Here it stays on my desk to notate what you're hearing, what you're experiencing, what you're feeling. One of the things we love about our work with Quiet Parks is that it's not just about decibel levels and noise pollution events and all these things. It's about how you're feeling and how quiet makes you feel. That's why we all care so much, is that quiet makes us feel a certain way. And ecologically, it's super important. And we recognize that. And we also recognize it's important for us as humans to have quiet. So some sort of way to take notes. It could be digitally, it could be on paper. I've tried to use spreadsheets before and things like that to just kind of be able to note what I'm hearing, what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking at any given time throughout a data collection period. So I'll show you real quick. We'll kind of go through how we test. I'm going to send you all this info afterwards too, so don't feel like you have to note all this right now. I'll send it. But we like to do minimum data collection of 3 hours at a given time. And that should be 3 days in a given week. Usually we can't camp out at these places for weeks on end or deploy equipment in them for weeks on end, which would be ideal. So what we try and do is that within a 7-day period, we test 3 of the 7 mornings. We like good weather windows. And like Gordon was saying earlier, 1 to 2 hours before sunrise to 1 to 2 hours after sunrise. Sound travels so much better. And it's a beautiful time for listening for sure. We like to collect our data when it's calm, clear. If it's really windy, if any of you have ever put a microphone out in the wind, you know how that goes. So we really try and avoid windy mornings, rain, things like that. tend to interfere a little bit with how accurate our noise pollution data is. We also try and not set up like next to a stream or next to like a geyser or some sort of consistent source of sound. We want to be away from all that stuff. So we're getting kind of the largest acoustic horizon possible during our testing period. And then, like I said, we want to take notes during that testing period. So we'll wake up at 4 a.m. and hit record. And that whole time I'm there noting what I'm hearing, what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, to try and get a better idea of just collect as much information as possible about not only the quantitative experience, but also the qualitative side of things. Sean asked quickly, 3 hours of continuous recording or 3 hours of recording in a total per day? Good question. 3 hours continuous is kind of the minimum. However, I often will set out gear at 4 a.m. and not press stop until noon. Sometimes it all depends on the area, but we like to have a minimum of 3 hours there. More is always better. If you can leave it out for 24 hours, awesome. 2 weeks, even better. But that's kind of the minimum I'm talking about here. Here's like a little example of just one of my noise logs from a random day that I pulled from a recent trip to the desert in Southern California. I took a little screenshot of my waveform as well and the recording location here. So what I do is when I look through my notes and listen to the sound file at the same time, I think the sound file ends up expanding upon my understanding of what noise pollution events were happening at a given time. So you'll see some of these bullet points in my noise log are kind of vague, like distant road or prop plane at 621 through 626, or rumble at 705. Prop plane question mark. Sometimes when you're in these areas, it's hard to decide exactly what's going on. So that's when I'll come back into the studio, re-listen to my sound recording with my noise log, and start to try and pick apart those notes. Not that you have to know what it is, but it's fun. It's a fun investigation.
Oh my God, Matt. Now I understand what you mean. I just have to tell a real quick story. Anza Borrego Desert State Park invited us down and paid for their place to be tested. They have a science research station, everything. I had been there 10 years earlier. It was absolutely quiet. All right. I was confident that it would pass. And then Matt comes back and he says, no, there's not a chance. So you can just see how quickly this area changed and how much that area is now being used by air traffic that 10 years wasn't. And that's part of the belief in Quiet Parks International, is that if you can label a place with, a wilderness quiet park status, all right, and that shows on the map and hopefully in future maps and the aeronautical charts, that'll influence people's behavior and choices when we start to create our jetways in the sky.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, so this is, I hope you have quieter recording sessions than this one ended up being. But I kind of correlate all this data and then decide, okay, is there a 15-minute noise-free interval? However, I'd say most of the times where I find a quiet park, it's very evident. You just know right away. Like after our first morning in American Prairie Reserve, Nick and I were like, yeah, this is a quiet place for sure. You can feel it, whereas Anza Borrego Desert State Park, I spent a week searching for it, tested 8 different locations, couldn't find that 15-minute noise-free interval. So just an example of some of the data that's found, but an important part is asking yourself, does it feel quiet? Am I having a quiet experience here? And the answer to that question at Anza Borrego was, yeah, I am having a quiet experience, but the data doesn't match up to that experience. So trying to hold those two things and weigh them against each other is a little tricky sometimes. Kind of last big point before then we'll just launch into question and answers. And if anyone has to hop off at the top of the hour, save your questions, email me. We'll set up a time to chat. I'm sorry, my presentation went a little longer than I would have liked, but really want to answer all your questions. So hold on to them and we'll hop on a call to answer them if you can't stick around. When we talk about funding wilderness quiet parks, I think it's important to be transparent that a lot of the way that we've been able to travel to American Prairie, Haleakala, Glacier National Park has been that we've funded those efforts either out of our own pockets personally or privately funded through a donation from someone. Our goal is to get to the point where I can send expense reimbursement to anyone all over the world and have little sound recording kits that I can send you. We're working on that, but as of right now, most of our work has been funded by ourselves. I have a privilege that I'm a sound designer and a sound recordist by trade. So a trip to a place like American Prairie Reserve ends up kind of hitting two birds with one stone for me. I can collect data for wilderness quiet parks, but also I get really great sound recordings that I can work on selling, licensing to people, including in my collections, things like that. That's not the case for the majority of people. So it's expensive to go out into the woods for any sort of length of time. But there are some good options for being able to try and find funding for your area. Where we first like to start and just knock on the door is obviously if there's a management agency that's interested, that would be wonderful. We've had success there with the Parks Canada office. Sorry, Gordon, you just raised your hand.
Finish your thought, Matt, and then I just want to say a quick thing about quiet conservation areas before we get into the Q&A.
Yep, totally. So for instance, we're working with Parks Canada right now, not only on the Grasslands project, but also there's a new proposed national park in Canada that they are hiring. This is not public information, by the way, so I would appreciate this not going super public, but they are hiring us to do sound surveys of this proposed national park so they can see what the impact of designating it as a national park is. Parks Canada is unique in that way. The National Park Service in the States hasn't expressed as much interest in funding us to do this work. A lot of our other funding for wilderness quiet parks has come from foundations that are set up to support specific pieces of land. So in Anza Borrego Desert State Park, like Gordon was talking about, there's something called the Anza Borrego Foundation. They're a nonprofit, the official nonprofit partner of the park. Their job is to increase access, increase awareness, do educational stuff. They're the ones who paid us for the time and the expenses to go to the desert, to do our soundscape readings, to work with them on interpretive materials, things like that. That's a great place to start. It's kind of working with different nonprofits in and around the places where you're hoping to award to see if they have some money to throw at this cause or if they're interested. Those conversations can seem like a really big, scary thing to approach. But what we do, and Gordon and I do this like multiple times a week, is we just hop on a phone call with people. We just talk with them, get to know them, talk about why the park is special, talk about the sound. We're not really like asking them for anything because if they're the good partner, they're going to know it's important. So these conversations like don't have to be as big and stressful as they might seem. But it's a good place to start. It's kind of these organizations that exist separately from the government entities that are set up to preserve, protect, and educate the public about these areas of land. You all too might have good info on where to seek funding for, and it's so different based on where you live. In the States, we have a totally different structure around public land management, granting, nonprofits than exist in the EU, that exist in Asia, that exist in India. Every place is so different. So you all are going to know best how the systems where you live work. And we're always here to kind of be a sounding board for your ideas about how to get funding. We've had private entities like lodging and accommodations that are next to these parks reach out and say, hey, this would be really cool because we want to attract more visitors to the park. They sometimes will kick in money to help offset our expenses. And give some money to the organization. So there's no real one size fits all approach, unfortunately, but it requires boots on the ground, people who know the community, people who know these areas of land to help us figure out, okay, how do we get these efforts funded? So in brief, that's kind of like all the information I wanted to share with you all before we just kind of have a really great conversation and answer some questions. But Gordon, yeah, this is a good time to talk about quiet conservation areas for sure.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt. I do want to say about wilderness quiet parks in particular, or even urban quiet parks, quiet trails, all are categories that the pushback that occurred originally is, is like, well, I'll have to talk with high officials because I'm not sure if we can change our management policy, our management practices. They wanted to know how this award would change the way they are doing things and the way that they will do things in the future. And we corrected that by saying, no. This is an accolade. We are saying you are doing things right. Things are okay right now. And we're recognizing you for the significance of this place on a global scale. And that was a big game changer, and it always is, because the management itself is always looking to justify why they exist. And if they get an award, when it comes to budget time, they hold that out. So it's a good thing. So that is a fine point that I recommend in all of your conversations that you have when you're actually on the ground approaching anyone there, is you're testing for an award, right? So now quiet conservation areas, which is a new group. And this is sort of a brainstorm of mine because I recognized so many places that are worth saving and worth protecting weren't passing our tests, right? And everywhere from private lands, somebody's ranch, somebody's, getaway in the country, to a large wilderness area, such as Anza Borrego, that has this air traffic. Is there something that we can do for them? And that is to have them receive Quiet Conservation Area Award. And what this does is it recognizes publicly that this piece of property, this piece of land, and the award is given to the land managers or owners, wants to be quiet. They value quiet. And quiet is something that they want to hold out as something that should be protected, so that in whatever town meetings, whatever public hearings occur on adjacent land uses that might affect their property, somebody putting very real problem here in the States is people have contacted me that there's a firing range going in, and there's going to be target practice allowed, or there's going to be this and that. What can I do? And, to become a quiet conservation area. Now, to become a quiet conservation area, only two things are required. Right now, technically only one, which is that in their mission statement or whatever statement they have for their management policy, they include a phrase that values natural quiet. All right. So something actually has to be stated in basic documents that they value natural quiet. And future, we will also ask for a quiet management plan. And to my knowledge, there's not even a single example of a quiet management plan anywhere, all right, even at our wilderness quiet parks, et cetera. That is something that's in a management policy, but there's no actual way of implementing quiet protection or conservation. And we'll probably require that later when we can actually provide a template or a workbook where people can use what we provide, so they can easily put it together rather than try to invent their own. Plus, as we populate the world map with quiet conservation areas, I think we're going to vastly outnumber the actual established parks, all right, for quiet. And by doing that, it'll have, the same, I think, effect of these meetings. we aren't alone in our belief in our that quiet is important and how we value quiet, that you can look and see you're one of hundreds in your country that are a quiet conservation area. And as these things no longer become new events for town planners to see, oh my gosh, there's quiet conservation area. How do we need to take that into account? That they'll already take it into account, as they have in Stockholm, where our executive director of urban quiet parks, Ulf Bowman, has for over a decade assisted them in planning calm. That's pretty much the equivalent of quiet, calm areas in corridors of the city of Stockholm. And that is not just something that you declare for now, but it's something that you plan for the future, right? And their planning was for 2050. So it's a place that if you're testing an area, maybe it's a good start point. You think this might be a wilderness quiet park? Make it a quiet conservation area now. Put it in queue, and then test it and see what happens. So there we are. Thank you, and we'll have more about that later, I'm sure, as we make progress.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Back to you, Matt.
Yeah, I think we're just kind of at the point we're going to start talking, answering some questions. So we can do it any way that folks want. If you want to put questions in the chat, we can do it that way. If you want to unmute, you can like raise your hand or something and I can unmute you for a question. I did get 1 or 2 questions in the presentation that I'll read real quickly first. One is from David saying, do we also plan to make the Quetico Wilderness area north of the Boundary Waters a wilderness quiet park as well? Will it be a cross-agency kind of situation similar to American Prairie and Grasslands? As of right now, the answer is no, because one is I haven't been able to get into Quetico yet. The other reason is that a lot of the flights that barely miss the Boundary Waters do fly over Quetico. So it seems, at least from my studying, that Quetico experiences a good bit more noise pollution than the Boundary Waters, but it's certainly on the list of places that I really would like to explore. Another question from Ken is about an SPL meter. And he's wondering our spec for how long we should be able to measure ideally, and a list of affordable SPL meters that have proven to meet this. The ideal situation, Ken, is like we deploy a type 1 sound level meter that logs data every second for 12 months out of the year. That's my dream, is to be able to install these things all over the place. In lieu of that, a really great way to start is data logging during when you're doing your data collection for wilderness quiet parks, let's say. And based on that time of day, if you have logging in the sound level meter, it allows you to essentially get an XML document at the end that gives you your averages and your peaks and things like that, your minimum and maximum. I don't have an up-to-date list. I know a year or two ago, Gordon, you and I had we were keen on one type of sound level meter. Right now, what I'm recommending to people is your money's better spent. At least this is my opinion. Happy to hear what other folks think. Your money's better spent, if you want to spend money on a sound level meter, buying that Faber acoustical app, the Sound Level Meter Pro, for $100, which is shown to be like a decibel within what our really nice sound level meters show. Because a sound level meter that only costs $100 is not going to get you something super high quality unless you can afford something like a Brule and Kjær or an NTS meter or something like that, which those costs upward of $3,000 US. So I'd say go for the app on your phone first, see how you use it, get good at using it. I have a little tripod set up for my phone so that way I'm not handling it as I'm as I'm moving about.
And for also would like to say, for any pre-evaluation that you do of a potential wilderness quiet park, because to actually do the formal testing for a wilderness quiet park, it's likely that there's going to be 2 or 3 person team involved, each in charge of various aspects of that, because we've defined quiet as a multi-sensory experience. And we've talked a lot about sound, but also you can't have a wilderness quiet park with a long noise-free interval if it's an abandoned landfill that's uncapped and all you see is trash and it stinks. Quiet needs to be multi-sensory. You can't hear a decibel. So why do we, and we don't have any minimum or maximum decibel level. So what is the point of a decibel? And that is primarily because it's the way that noise studies have been done in the past, and all the experts want to see the data log, because then they can continue to think and they know that we've done their homework. But we aren't doing a noise study, we're doing a quiet study. All right. And quiet really is an experience. All right. So what we have when our team goes in and they do the formal study, there's one thing that has to prevail no matter what our standards are, is that the team will unanimously and unhesitantly say that it's quiet, no matter what the data says. Because, we're evolving our standards with our experience. And if our standards somehow say it's not quiet, but the team says unanimously, yes, this is quiet, well, it's time to modify the standards. Mm-hmm. So I would certainly not spend my money. I have to, say, Matt, I would argue, even though I own all these sound level meters, I wouldn't spend my money on a sound level meter before I spent the money and found the microphone that I wanted.
Great point. Yeah, totally agree with that. The follow-up question to that Ken had was, is it only for Apple products, or is it also for Android? Some of you might know more than this than I do, but our resident acoustician, Ethan Bordeaux, who's like absolutely a wizard, has explained to me that the way that the iPhone can calibrate, or the type of capsule that the iPhone uses, is more easily calibratable, easier to calibrate to these sound pressure level apps. So the accuracy on the iOS or on the Android apps it's not as accurate. I'm sure there's some good options, and with some research, I'm sure I could find something, but the apps we mentioned are really iOS specific because of their ability to be calibrated. Next question is from Bryn, who has a question for, she said me and Emily, but I think Nick and Emily, which is, where was that recording in Haleakala taken? They went in November and it was just a lot of silence. But yeah, curious where that recording was taken. Nick, I think you said it was up on top, but yeah, curious for more info on where that was taken.
Yeah. That was near the Hosmer Grove campground. I ended up staying there for a couple nights and kind of just hiking along the crater rim. And just between the rim and the campground, it's almost like that kind of zone where there's environmental changes from higher up to lower, the temperature, the clouds, and all of that. So it was very, very lush, just a little bit lower next to the campground. And then just a little higher up, it was quite a bit quieter. Although we did hike to what was it? The Paliku, Paliku campsite, and it seemed that there was some promising birds there, but it was a long hike and we weren't spending the night there. So we would have probably liked to have gone back and stayed a night or two at the Paliku campsite. It seemed really, really beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, time of year makes such a difference for these places too. Like I was saying,
we were there in early March or late February.
Yeah, I bet that's like such a good time for bird song. Yeah, lots of places that are lush with bird song. Even places like the Hoh Rainforest in Olympic National Park are lush with bird song in, April, May, June. By July and August, it's like, where did all the birds go? And that's just the seasonality of places, and every place has a different seasonality to its soundscape, which is also really beautiful to kind of witness. Pontus asked, hi, I wonder if we have the ambition to reduce noise in nature, like asking airlines if they could use another route. or asking authorities if they can reduce speed on a road. Short answer to the question is, yeah, we do. We do want to be able to do that. Some ideas that we have floating around that are kind of like quiet flight paths that airlines could take around sensitive wilderness areas, things like that. However, we just don't quite have the ease of access in pursuing those routes yet.
Yeah, Matt, I'd like to say something here, because in the case, and I noticed that the following question by Derek that expresses how wilderness areas should be no flight zones. I wholeheartedly agree. So in the early days before QPI, when it was 1 square inch of silence foundation, I actually wrote the individual airlines which were flying over 1 square inch of silence. And all 3 of them, American, Alaskan, and Hawaiian Airlines, responded favorably and said that they would no longer fly unscheduled flights. But the scheduled flights are assigned by the FAA. And the FAA, in the United States at least, and in the FAA, the only, and they have no environmental mandate at the FAA. It's all about public safety and efficiency and this, that, and the other thing. And they've been totally uncooperative with this. In fact, created, in my opinion, the 20-year delay for the air traffic management plans over national parks. They see it as another bale of barbed wire hitting the planes. You know, they like freedom of the skies. But there's something very unique that's coming up here, and that is the 100th anniversary of Charles Lindbergh's transatlantic flight. And that will occur in 2027, of which there'll be many commemorative events, of which I hear is going to promote green flight paths and reduce carbon emissions and all of that. And we're hoping that during that period of time that the FAA will be approachable. And if it's not the FAA, at least their mandates can be rewritten by Congress.
Yep. I think too that reducing road noise is that's almost an even more complex issue. And what we've found is that even changing like rubber compound on tires can be more effective than speed reduction. And I think that there's some really interesting stuff happening specifically in the EU around noise pollution caused by roadways. It's not quite as much of a hot button issue here in the States yet. But that's usually how it goes with environmental stuff, is Europe does a better job and then America follows up when we get to it. So I think there's some promising stuff with just changing the way that we build roads, not only with tire compounds and the tires we put on our vehicles, but also the actual compound that the road is made out of. We can make asphalt quieter without that much more expense. So I think those things are starting to become more talked about, because we're all starting to realize, even those of us not on this call right now, the vast population's realizing that quiet's important, and noise pollution does degrade quality of life, and especially in these big metro areas. There's a lot of work being done to try and reduce noise. So I have hope. If someone were to come to Quiet Parks and had experience with FAA or air traffic planning or road construction, urban planning, it would be an amazing add to our team. It's just at this point, our bandwidth is limited by who we have and how much we're able to put in. So we love all these ideas. Anything to do with making our world quieter and making quiet more accessible is something we're interested in. So yeah, that's the long, short answer to that question. Dirk asked, do we work on quiet urban trails? And Dirk, yes, we do. I'm going to put a link to our site in the chat there, and that brings you to our Urban Quiet Parks program. And that is led by a board member of ours by the name of Ulf Bowman, who is in Sweden. Ulf has been doing incredible work, even long before Quiet Parks International was a thing, about establishing a sense of quiet in urban areas. And he's working it seems like in every country on the planet to name an urban quiet park. So you can find out more about his work there. And we had another one of these meetings maybe 2 months ago or something, 3 months ago. And that was really focused on urban quiet parks. But if you have questions specific about urban quiet parks, happy to connect you with Ulf for sure. All right. Other questions in the chat? Does anyone want to unmute? We can talk in person. Again, I have unlimited time, and I know we all really appreciate your time as well. So hop off whenever you want, or stay as long as you can.
Well, I'm going to have to say goodbye to everyone now because I have another meeting coming up at 11:30.
We'll have no fun without you, Gordon, I promise.
Oh, yes, they will. You did a great job, Matt. You know,
Quiet
yeah,
speaks for itself.
thank
We're
you.
just the messengers.
Yeah. All right. And
All right. Have a good day, Gordon.
take care. Thank you.
I just got one more question in the chat from Vicky. It'd be great to eventually include underwater and ship noise. Yes, such a good point. Quiet marine sanctuaries was part of our founding ideas for program areas. The struggle that we've had is we haven't found the right person to head up that program area. We really feel like myself, Gordon, a lot of our other board members, we know a lot about terrestrial or land-based noise and sound. But sound underwater and how it affects marine habitats is like totally different and even more of a problem in some ways for wildlife. So we're really looking for someone to lead that program and start establishing quiet marine sanctuaries as well. So if you all know anyone, please send them our way. Someone who's like a marine biologist or something like that would be wonderful.
Where can we get copies or purchase your recordings?
It's a good question. So Gordon and myself, we have some of our recordings available online through Quiet Parks International. You can buy certain collections of Gordon's on his website. If you just Google Gordon Hempton, you'll find his site. Nick as well, I think, has some recordings that are for sale. Most of my recordings, you can buy sound libraries, but they're like priced at a point that are meant for production companies and stuff. So I don't have like a personal collection yet. That's coming soon. But yeah, if you can find out, and listen to a good amount of stuff from Gordon online. Nick, do you have recordings online for sale?
It's ongoing work in progress.
Okay.
Most of my recordings are kind of just free to listen to on SoundCloud or YouTube and places like that.
That's right. Yeah, YouTube's a good place to go. We also have done like a lot of podcasts and media stuff that include a lot of our sound that are free to listen to. And we kind of dive into more of these topics in longer format, which is really fun. So you can find some of those podcasts, which have a lot of sound in them too. There's one that a few Quiet Parks people worked on, myself included, called When the Earth Started to Sing. And it's a book adaptation by David Haskell that just came out. And David George Haskell is a phenomenal author, talks about sound a lot. So we did like an audio accompaniment for him. And that's just like 40 minutes of really cool sound design, mostly using mine and Gordon's sound recordings to kind of illustrate how sound evolved on planet Earth. So little self-plug there. All right. Anyone else? Questions about gear, recording, music? Like, there's nothing off limits here. Going once.
I have a question, Matt, to you about sound recording. When you do a longer sound recording, like a couple of hours or so, and then you put it in some kind of software and try to analyze where the noise happens, like airplanes and stuff. I understand that you can see on the audio file when it's sort of peaking, but is there a way to do this with sort of artificial intelligence to find out where are the noises?
Yes, there is. And that's actually something I'm working on currently, is kind of an automated system to be able to do that. And the hang up I'm currently having is that it's easy to do with the same recordings from the same microphone set from the same sound recorder. But as soon as you start adding in variables like different types of recorders, different microphone capsules, the measurement changes and the AI seems to have a hard time deciphering it. So it's something I'm working on because it would make it so easy. Like I could have anyone here upload a sound recording and we'd know in seconds if it would be a wilderness quiet park. So something I'm working on, because doing it by hand, let me tell you, it's very tedious. Very, very tedious.
So is it a plugin in a software, or is it a special software that does this, or?
So I'm working with someone who's essentially trying to develop a program through R, which I'm no programmer, but R is a programming language and program to detect these noise pollution events, as well as pull other valuable data, like being able to tell us about the biodiversity in the area. How many separate Western meadowlark calls do we have in a given recording? But that stuff is definitely taking some time, and also it's expensive. So I'm hoping that in this year I can invest some time and money into developing that, because I think our goal is to make this process as user friendly and as equitable as possible. Like right now, what happens is I'm kind of the gatekeeper in some ways to more wilderness quiet parks, because everything has to flow across my desk. Which is a real disservice to everyone who wants to get involved, wants to record, wants to help. Right now, I have no way of verifying these recordings unless I listen to them myself. So I'm really trying to figure out how to make it easier for people to do that. Not because I don't like listening to the recordings, because it's like the greatest joy I have in life is sitting here and listening, but just so we can get more data on these parks and get analyzed and award more places.
I understand. Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that. What model Sony recorders is a question that we got. So we have used the A10s a lot recently, the D100s and the D10s, I believe, if my memory is serving me correctly. The A10s are like really tiny, but pack a huge punch. You can fit like 5 of them in the palm of your hand, and the battery lasts for like 10 hours on its own. So we've just found like the recent line of Sony recorders has been really incredible. There's kind of not one in the lineup that we haven't liked. And they stopped producing certain models of it that we were really excited about, but started producing new models, and they're all really good. They all have high sensitivity microphones. A lot of them have the ability to plug in external microphones, which is really great too. So it's kind of nice to have that package just so tiny and accessible where you can throw it anywhere.
Do any of those models have rechargeable batteries?
Yes, so I believe the Sony A10 does. Let me just make sure I'm quoting this right here. Oh, so it's not, is it the A10 I'm thinking of? Yeah, the A10 has a rechargeable battery. And what I've found is that with a lot of the batteries that I use or these devices, is they're also powerable through USB. So if you have like a USB battery bank, like I have a slew of USB battery banks here, you can plug those into your recorders and it will power them for even longer. So I think in combination with like using, when I run a MixPre, which is the sound recorder I use on my big microphone setups, I have these Sony style batteries that last for 11 hours or so on their own. And then if I also plug them in to an external battery bank, I can get 30 hours, 40 hours, depending on the size of the battery bank, if I'm comfortable leaving my equipment out for that long. So each of these has a little bit different power requirements, but a lot of them do have internal rechargeable batteries, or you can get rechargeable batteries for them. So like rechargeable lithium batteries in lieu of AA's is a great way to go. It's important to recognize that we're like an environmental conservation organization, and any way we can reduce our impact is preferable. So yeah, using rechargeables anytime we can is really good. That's a great question. Oh, and Vicky, you messaged me and I will respond to you. If you just want to drop me your email, I'll send you an email. It'd be great. Great. Well, if there's nothing else that anyone wants to cover, we can say goodbye for the day. We are hoping to be able to do this kind of meetup much more frequently. It's one of the things that we get a lot of joy from and I think is really important. This is going to be a big year for Quiet Parks, and I think we're going to be asking, we want to get people more involved and feel more included. So this is something we want to do more of. And oh yeah, Derek.
One more thing, sorry to cut you off.
No, don't worry.
Going back to the previous question about where can I purchase recordings from you? Have you ever looked into Bandcamp?
Yes.
Because I have some of my recordings on there, haven't made any money, but they're there. It's an option.
Yep. Yeah. So I think some of us do have recordings on Bandcamp or similar sites like that. One of the main reasons I haven't yet, and this is more like a sound design business thing, is that I want my products to be just licensable by these companies and not have them downloadable for personal use, which is a shame because I love sharing my recordings with people. So I'm trying to figure out how to like share them for free if possible, while also retaining people's licensable rights to the sound recordings. I'd hate for, Skywalker Sound to call me up and be like, why is the sound recording you licensed to us also on this guy's ambient music track? So I'm trying to figure out how to provide my ambient musician friends with sound and then also retain the contract agreements I have with folks. But yeah, Bandcamp might be a good option for me. Okay. Well then, keep an ear out for more of these meetings. Like I said, if there's anything you all want to talk about, just one-on-one, send me an email, send Gordon an email. We are just so appreciative of everyone's time and effort so far. And I know I have calls scheduled with some of you coming up that I'm looking forward to. And anything in the meantime, just reach out. So thanks so much for being here. Everyone enjoy the rest of your days, evenings, mornings, wherever you are. So thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.